Okay, so we've been talking about specifications, and really, specifications are specific things. Now we're going to talk about codes, and codes are more like general oversight sorts of things. Um, Specifications apply at one specific location or in one specific instance, whereas codes are more of a broad overview sort of thing. So codes are broad based rules, big picture things, you might say. And typically, codes are established by either government agencies or professional organizations. Now, before you get all suspicious and Illuminati on me here, just understand there are some codes that affect your daily life that are for your benefit, right? Think about the residential building code, right? Residential building code lays out the minimal conditions so that houses and commercial buildings, when they are built, meet the minimal requirement not to fall over. Um, Building codes are not bad things, right? Take a look here. I'm sure this has got a problem related to the building code, right? If that's our only way out, someone's in big trouble for that one. How about the food safety code? Isn't it true that the health department has set out a bunch of codes so that when you go into a restaurant and you order a meal, the chances of you getting food poisoning or seriously ill from that meal are very low, right? So food safety code applies to the food industry. And then we know that there are environmental safety codes also for businesses so that when they operate, they don't pollute the land, the air, and the water to an excessive degree. At least that's the idea. So there are some codes that we interact with on a daily basis without even realizing it in most cases. Piping codes exist for the piping industry, right? And codes and specs, well, we can see a difference here between the two. So a code, again, it's a big picture thing. It's kind of a larger overview. Code might be all piping components shall conform to ASME standards, American Society of Mechanical Engineering standards. Okay, so that's kind of like a big picture. It applies to every single part of the project, right? Well, here's a spec. All piping drawings shall show dimensions in feet and inches. Inches shall be used when the dimensions are less than 1 foot. Dimensions will be to the nearest 16th of an inch. So this code applies to every single aspect of the project. It has to apply to ASME standards, whereas this is telling us really specifically when we dimension drawings, what units we're using, and how precise they need to be. Okay, so both codes and specs have been developed, again, through trial and error over many years or even decades, right? Trying to get it just perfectly right. And of course, as material science advances in things like alloys and metallurgy, that means new testing is involved to see what new codes and new specs are going to be required to make piping systems that are safe and long lasting. Codes are used by the designer as they are planning a project. They're used by fabricators. Again, there might be a code that has very specific, or a code that has bearing on what kind of welding rods we're going to use for a particular welding process. I have a quick link here if you want to take a look at it. Engineering Toolbox brings you to the ASME, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, their pressure piping standards. And piping standards are, wow, you want to help yourself fall asleep. If you're having a little insomnia, there are multiple books for the multiple different types of process piping for multiple industries. And generally, these aren't free. You've got to buy these things. If you want a complete set of standards, it's going to cost money. You basically send ASME a big check, and they will send you a CD with all of the applicable codes, so that your designs are in conformity with their standards. I've got a few of them set up right over here. Pulled up a couple of sets of codes. we have? The Water Agency has its set of piping standards for piping and appurtenances. Let's see, how many pages? Oh my, lots of pages, right? So, reading and doing research, it's not just something that you do in English classes. It's something that has to deal with the higher end processes or the higher end responsibilities that somebody might have as a drafter or a designer. We'd have to be familiar with all of these different standards and codes so that when we are designing the system, or if we are checking a system that's been designed to make sure it meets all the requirements, that everything is like it's supposed to be, because if it's not, we're going to have some big trouble. Okay, so that's our discussion on codes and specifications. We talked about line numbering and we talked about specification classes also.